And why does this generation of kids just turn their back on their parents? Like, I would never treat my parents the way some of the things have been.
Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you are doing great. So this lady bring her issue to TikTok why her daughter would turn her back on her. And here was his speeches. Everybody was giving their different opinion why children will turn their back on their parents. Is the fault of the parents or something else lead to that they will turn their back on their parents? But anyway, let's dive into it.
And why does this generation of kids just turn their back on their parents? Like, I would never treat my parents the way some of the things have been said to me. Just so much entitlement these days.
The number one way to push your kid even further away is to be dismissive. You should be listening instead of pointing fingers. Now, from my perspective as a millennial, from a really high level, this is what it boils down to. Why so much of our generation and those coming after us are distancing ourselves from older generations, including some of our parents. And it has to do with mental health and how we have put a much bigger importance on it, trying to understand it, trying to work on ourselves. And it is often being dismissed by older generations. Here's what a lot of it looks like. There are some pretty unhealthy parenting practices in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and probably before. And I'm under no delusions that we are going to get it perfect. Of course, our kids are going to have problems with the way that we parented them as well. But the fact remains that many of us experience trauma from our childhood. Things like being spanked or being parented with guilt or fear or lies instead of having difficult conversations. And that's something that we're trying to work through, which again is dismissed by older generations. Us being in touch with our emotions, paying attention to our bodies, you dismiss as us being weak. And a lot of the older generation refuses to see us as adults. We're still treated like children, even though many of us are in our 30s, pushing 40. We have mortgages and children. We have decades of experience and careers. And to be completely honest with you, a lot of us have more relevant life experience at this point than the older generations. But you don't want to see that. You still treat us as children. You act like we don't know what we're doing. Which brings me to the third point, and probably the most important. A lot of us are parents. We are trying to heal ourselves so we can be there for our kids. We're trying to parent differently because we see the way that we were parented as kids and we don't care for it. We think there are better ways, and that's what we are trying to do. But again, it's often dismissed by older generations. We get a lot of criticism. So you have an older generation that caused trauma, which has created a dynamic between the two of us that makes us feel uncomfortable around you. You dismiss our attempts to try and heal, and you make us feel like we're weak because we're trying to heal. And then you're getting in between us trying to provide a better life for our children. And I'm sorry, but if you're going to get in between us and our children, 10 times out of 10, we are going to choose our children. And all of that said, I can only try to imagine how painful it would be if when my children became adults, they chose to distance themselves from me further than what is completely normal for someone going out into the world on their own for the first time. It is not something that we take lightly. So when you dismiss it, try and think how serious it must be for us to make the decision to start distancing ourselves from the very people that brought us into this world.
I had to stitch that creator's video because I can't find the original. It is Sunday self-care. I'm obviously doing a little mask on my pimple here. I'm doing my nails. I got the time, so let's get into it. Basically, if you don't know what that lady's talking about, she's saying, I don't understand how kids these days are so entitled and can cut off contact from their parents, and that she would never treat her parents that way. Now, I'm currently in the middle of a very difficult and complicated situation with my family. If you saw my Christmas video, you know what I'm talking about. So I feel like I can speak on this topic from experience. And honestly, much of what I'm about to say is a little harsh, so if you're upset about that, you can go ahead and cry about it later because I really don't care. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but there is almost like an epidemic of millennial and Gen Z children, having complicated relationships with their parents. Like, this is a common theme that's going on right now. I'm not a parent, and I honestly don't know if I ever intend to become one, but the biggest issue that I'm noticing with these parent-child relationships that we're seeing on TikTok, similar to the one that this woman is referencing, is that a lot of these parents, particularly boomers, feel like their children owe them something. And they feel like because they raised them and put food on the table, put a roof over their heads, clothed them, bought them toys as a child, they feel like their children owe them something later on in adult life. And before I even continue this, let me say I am not at all talking about those spoiled ass little bratty ass kids who, when they get cut off at 25, they throw a fit with mommy and daddy. I'm not talking about those kids. Obviously they exist. But when you decide to become a parent, and this is also why I have reservations of becoming a parent myself someday, when you become a parent, you need to understand that your child doesn't owe you shit later on in life. You made the choice to bring them into this world unconsensually. They did not have the choice to come here. And so for you to throw these things in their face later on, right, which a lot of parents do, I raised you. I put a roof over your head. I put food on the table. I sacrificed so much for you. You are the parent who made the decision to bring another human into this world. And providing for and protecting a child is exactly what you do as a parent. Those are not things that your child needs to repay you for later on in life. You may have done the absolute best to your ability to parent and raise your child, but that also doesn't mean that you haven't contributed to their trauma. And a lot of parents just refuse to recognize and acknowledge this fact that you could have been a great parent and still possibly hurt and damage your child in some way. Because it's not that we expect our parents to be unrealistically perfect. It's because a lot of you don't know how to take accountability for the ways in which you may have hurt us, and you feel like we owe you something later on. And I am well aware that being a parent can sometimes be a hard and thankless job, but it is a job that you signed up for willingly.
A child of a narcissistic parent decides to go no contact with them. People start asking questions like, what have you done? After all, you have only one parent. He is your dad. She's your mom. How could you do that? But nobody asks the question, what must these parents have done for the child to cut them off this way? What could have caused this child to give up on every single relationship in the family and leave so much behind? Why did they do this? Probably they are hurt. They might have been hurt by their family. Nobody cares to think about that. The only thing that people focus on is the socially and culturally appropriate thing. They do not care about the different possibilities, put parents on the pedestal, which enables their abuse and isolates this child further in their experience. Are you such a child? Let me know in the comments.
Generation that is so unsafe that we cut off our parents. Number one, the victim mindset. Poor me. How could they do this to me? There are two people in a relationship, and you will get zero accountability from somebody with that mindset. Instead, they externalize and blame. They believe that they are owed something for choosing to have children, which means that their love is conditional. Parents are also the lead for a relationship. So if you want a different relationship, you must change your behavior and your response to your child. Nothing in that video asks, I wonder what my child is going through right now. If you don't regularly ask your child how they're feeling and what they're going through, you can't expect them to do that for you. If my daughter wanted to cut me off, my response would be, I've hurt you. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, my girl. How can I be more supportive? What needs to change? Because this relationship is incredibly important to me. The word entitlement basically dismisses and invalidates anything you are going through. You're just being a brat. The definition for entitlement is expecting special treatment, which is basically the tagline for old school parenting. I get to scream and yell and treat you like this, but you can't do that to me because I'm a parent. So egocentric. Being egocentric is actually a child's role. And finally, they often engage in role coercion, which means they take away their love and approval in order to force you to do what they want you to do. People like that do not get access to you. I do not care if they are related to you.
Because a few months ago when I made a video about my feelings towards my biological mom and all the ways that I feel like she kind of failed me, she sent me a very nasty text, and I will say it in nicer words than she said that she doesn't owe me anything. And I was like, oh, that's news to me. I thought that you birthed me. My mistake. But a radical idea that our generation seems to hold that other generations just cannot grasp is that kids don't owe parents anything. Parents owe the kids everything because you chose to have us. It was a very non-consensual thing to bring us into the world. So to then throw things in our face like, I fed you, I clothed you, I took you to your t-ball games, and I paid for your freaking prom. Yeah, those were things you were supposed to do because you signed up for it. You chose it. We didn't have a lot of options, But I think it is so rich that she is calling our generation entitled for going non-contact with parents who are toxic and can't respect boundaries, when I think it is more entitled to expect your kids to have a relationship with you in their adulthood when they have all the choices in the world and free will, and expect for them to still come around you when you can't respect them and can't apologize and you can't go to therapy. You can't do simple things that they're asking you to do. I'm sure there are lots of bratty kids in this world, but as an adult who encounters so many other adults who have parents who just simply can't apologize, so who can't have any kind of accountability for their actions, I stand with the millennials on this one when we choose to stop talking to you. As a mom myself, I have seen firsthand how difficult it is to be a parent and how I'm making so many mistakes, and that one day I'm just going to hope and pray that they're going to forgive me for these mistakes, because I think that they have every right to go non-contact if I cannot uphold what I'm supposed to be doing as a parent, which is loving them, protecting them, and listening to them, because they are still humans. Yes, I birthed them, but they don't owe me anything. They are human and they have free will and they can make their own decisions. When that day comes, when they're an adult and they can decide if they want to continue having a relationship with me, because that is their right, I hope that I am worthy of having a relationship with them still, because I know that they can choose not to. And that does scare me. And I understand how that's like hurtful for parents. Like when you are putting so much work and you feel like you're doing your best, but you have to be willing to listen to them, because it's as simple as listening and saying sorry for a lot of kids. But you guys can't seem to do that. Also, just a thought for this woman: if you're in the baby boomer generation and you have multiple friends whose kids have gone non-contact with them as adults, maybe you are the common denominator. I mean, just a thought. Crazy thoughts.
So this video of this parent whose adult children have cut them off or they don't have a good relationship has been circulating my FYP. So let me try to simplify it as best I can. You'll have a lot of millennials who'll talk about the importance of mental health and parenting practices and all that. I am going to simplify it even more. If you are a parent and your adult children want little or nothing to do with you, probably the main reason is you are not caring about how they feel. Certainly, you have probably done an excellent job taking care of them physically. You probably paid for their college, fed them, clothed them, given them all kinds of material stuff. But when your children express their emotions, their feelings, how you have potentially harmed them, despite you having bad intentions or not, you don't want to hear it. It turns into a discussion of right and wrong to you versus validating your adult child's experience. Because feelings are not right or wrong. Feelings just are. And we also understand as millennial adult children that you weren't taught a lot of this emotional intelligence growing up. Neither were we. But we have learned that that is unhealthy. We've all gone to therapy to learn that's not how you interact with other human beings. That's not how you're empathetic and build strong emotional connections with people. And we have found a very strong correlation between being emotionally dismissed from anybody, but more importantly, our parents who are supposed to love us unconditionally. And what really makes it so much worse is that, one, you don't want to hear it, which leads us to believe that you don't actually care about our emotions, but we also know that you're probably incapable of caring. It's also really difficult for you to hear that maybe you weren't a perfect parent and you don't want to take any constructive criticism, because when you were a little child, constructive criticism meant that you were bad. And then when videos like this are made, you will see a lot of the people supporting this woman have their comments turned off or they have gone private. They clearly are not emotionally strong enough to listen to other people who are in positions of going no contact with their parents. And in no way is it entitlement to set boundaries and care for your emotional well-being. But the fact is, people are entitled to protect their peace. So certainly estranged parents can support each other, but publicly grieving is not going to guilt trip any adult child to come back to you.
If you have adult children and they don't talk to you, then you need to be in therapy to figure out what you can do better. and how you can rebuild that relationship. Because these adult children, we're done with the generational trauma.
Why? Where's the respect at for parents and appreciation for all they've done for you your entire life? Like,
People who choose, they decide to have kids, need to remember just because you managed to keep your child alive into adulthood does not mean that they owe you anything. That was literally just the basics of what you were supposed to do. Authority does not equal respect. Respect is something that you have to earn. It is something that you give and receive, not just receive.
like it was so much easier when the kids were little.
Ugh, I know. It's so much harder now that they're adults and don't need to rely on you and can be their own person, and you can't control them anymore.
Honestly, don't get it.
And if you never take the time to get help and realize your faults, then you never will.
It's not that we're entitled, but we're doing what's best for our mentality. If your adult child does not want to talk to you, it's most definitely you put them through some kind of trauma, not because they're spoiled or entitled. Think about it. Would I want to stay in touch with someone who screamed at me throughout my childhood? Stay in touch with someone who made me feel like I was such a failure? Physically hurt me, threatened to physically hurt me even when I was over 18? No, I would not. And I know some of you are still in that headspace. Okay, I'm the parent. I still deserve to be respected. Respect is a two-way street. And if you abused me throughout my childhood, I am not going to respect you. And just because you were the parent does not mean I'm going to give you an exception. If you ask me, the person who's really entitled is you and every single person in this comment section agreeing with you. Have you even watched the video that you posted?
Why? Where's the respect at for parents and appreciation for all they've done for you your entire life? Like,
sure, maybe you've done a lot of good. Maybe you sacrificed so much to put a roof over our head and food on the table, which is what you're supposed to do as a parent. But if you've also done a lot of bad, aka abusive to me, it doesn't even matter. The trauma will still be there. So if your 18 or 19-year-old moves out of the house and cuts ties with you, don't be frustrated or angry. They're human too, and they're doing what's best for their well-being. And if that includes cutting ties with you, wow, that says a lot about you as a parent.
So to provide even further clarity, the woman in that video goes on to say that those in our generation who distance themselves or go no contact with their families are very entitled. And I'm not here to attack or shame anyone, but as someone who has gone no contact with their family and guided many other clients through that process, I can say one thing. It was the last resort. Going no contact with your family or cutting off connections with your parents isn't something that just happens. There was a long road that led someone to that action. Many of us tried everything. Many of us were just looking for the bare minimum in terms of being seen and accepted and having the minimum level of respect from those in our family. And when it wasn't given to us, when repeating their own generational and ancestral trauma patterns that gave them some false sense of comfort was more important than respecting your own child, a lot of us finally did have to sever that cord. And here's the thing, many of us still don't want to. Many of us are still having this deep inner child part that is yearning for them to reach out to us and just say, hey, I see you.
Somebody. And I really desire to have a relationship with them. And they come to me one day and they say, hey, for years, your behavior harmed me and negatively impacted me and made it really hard for me to become a healthy person. And I need you to name that, and I need you to own that, and I need you to apologize to me. I would do everything in my power to not only do those things, but look myself in the mirror and say, wow, I need to change, because obviously what I've done, what I'm doing is not working, and I care about them and I want them in my life. I need to do better. That's accountability. When somebody says you harmed me, we don't get insecure and deflect and gaslight. We say, I'm so sorry. I fucked up. I'm going to do better. Let me dedicate myself to that. So
Please go watch the video that I'm stitching. He made incredible points. But I think it's funny how she goes on to call our generation entitled for setting boundaries and having to cut off abusive parents, while simultaneously feeling entitled to her children's respect simply because she was their parent. Parents often feel entitled to their children and their respect, and they don't see them as human beings. They see them kind of as possessions. They can be abusive and carry on generational trauma, be dismissive, and then be completely surprised when you cut them off and when you don't respect them. Let me give you an example with just how entitled abusive parents can be. My little sister unfortunately passed away from a motorcycle accident right before Christmas time. And she was kicked out by my mom when she found out that she was a lesbian. And then she went to live with her dad in a roach-infested motel. And then he kicked her out when she confronted him about how bad of a dad he was. And she was living on her own. She had no money for food. She was underweight. Her beautiful curly afro turned into thin, barely there hair. And while they knew that she had no money for food or to survive, my mother got a tummy tuck. When she got into the accident and we were all at the hospital, I hadn't spoken to them in years. And my stepdad was saying things that were completely untrue. And I confronted him about that. And he was ready to throw hands with me. My mom came to his defense, even though she cheated on him with his best friend that she had only known for a week, moved him in with 2 daughters in the house. Anyway, I digress. They said, "You're so judgmental. Who are you to judge? You're nobody. You're so judgmental. You didn't even say hi to us when you walked in the door. You didn't say hi to your parents." After all the abuse, after all the trauma, after all they did to us as children, and all that they put us through, they still feel entitled to our respect. Mind-blowing. And then they act absolutely flabbergasted when we have to cut them off because they are extremely toxic for our mental health. This is the generation that says enough is enough. My mental health comes first. I'm not carrying on generational trauma. And if that means having to cut you off, that's what we're going to do. You're not entitled to our respect simply because you kept us alive as children. We didn't ask to be here.
Please don't forget to leave your opinion down below what you think. And don't forget to subscribe, turn on notification. Anytime I upload, you will be notified. Stay blessed and bye-bye.